Well, I didn't decide to go to college. I actually, it was never when I was in high school, it was never really part of the reality in my family to go to college. In fact, I never knew of anyone to go to college, or even the upperclassmen when I was in high school. I didn't know of any of them going to college. So it was not any part of the questioning or discussion that we were having in high school. But one day, I was going to the student cafeteria and to eat lunch like everyone else did, and this man was there, kind of a tall man, and he stood out. Obviously, he wasn't one of the teachers in the school, and that was here in Kentucky. And anyhow, he stopped me and he said, "Young man, are you planning to go to college?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." He says, "Well, I've got the college for you. We need to talk." And he was there was something about him that really caught my attention. And so I sat down with him, and he talked to me about college, and he was a representative of Berea College. Never heard of it, didn't know anything about it, but he told me that I could go there and mostly go there for free, really. And so it caught my attention still more, and he said, "Well, fill in this form." And I literally filled it in right there. And he says, "Well, you need to do these sorts of things, take an ACT exam and do this and that." And I went ahead and did that. But I was kind of nervous, so I recruited my friend Mike. And so together Mike and I did this process. And the only school that either of us applied to was Berea, and we were both accepted. Well, I don't know that there was one figure that motivated me to go to college other than the man that I mentioned, who made it possible for me to go. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone to college. I would have done probably what my neighborhood kids did, you know, get a job at the time. The UPS plant at the airport was being developed, and that was the job that many people were looking at in Louisville. But anyhow, I think in some ways what motivated me was myself. I knew that I wanted to be in college by this time, and it was really up to me at the time. One thing, at least for me, and maybe this is shared with other first-generation students, I couldn't talk to my family about it. It's not like that they were unwilling to listen, they just couldn't really relate to that. I learned that early on, so it wasn't as if I could call my family to say, you know, I'm really not sure which courses to take, or I'm not sure what major I should pursue. In fact, that was a real struggle for me, because I felt that there was no one who could help me do this, to choose a major. And that was really hard. But over all of those sort of struggles, as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study, how I could best excel at Berea, I sort of turned inward in that respect. Funny enough, Mike and I were both so nervous when we took the placement exams for the college, I forgot what they called them at Berea, neither one of us tested out in 100 level math or English. So we had to both take the remedial math and English classes, which allowed us to get there the summer before, which I really believe made all the difference for me, to start early, to get a sort of a jump start on the process. And it was really hard, actually, exciting. Of course, I had that summer to get a head start, and that really helped. In those couple of months over the summer, I was able to meet some friends and learn way around campus and things like that. But when all of the other students came to campus, it was exciting, but kind of scary too. I had never really been outside of my hometown. At that time, I think the farthest I had ever traveled was to Indiana. And these were people from all over Kentucky and the region. And I lived in a hall called Dana Hall, and there were folks there from other countries that I could never connect to. I was almost always afraid of them. But then in classes, I knew that I had to work harder. It turned out later on that my best friend at Berea, she was tall and beautiful and smart, and it seemed like she never had to study at all. And I felt that I had to constantly work 10 times as hard as she did in order to make the same grade. And I may have overcompensated because I did always graduate well, complete my courses almost at the top or near the top of all my classes, and I eventually graduated with honors. But I felt that I always had to work harder than the other students. Well, the adversity, as I mentioned a little bit ago, was obviously I had no money, so that meant I had to rely heavily on myself. I didn't have the family support, or at least the connection from my family, to help me understand the problems I was encountering, or how to find solutions to those problems. I couldn't rely on them. That was very, very hard. There, as we talked about, that sense of being fake, or that I didn't belong somehow, kept me from seeking out support or joining groups or circles of support that I could have. I should have done that. Those were the three major, I think, adversities that I had. And then, of course, there was, funny enough, I have my own personal adversities. I've never been a shy person, but I've been very insecure physically as well, and that came to head in college. I never felt that so much in high school. I didn't belong to sports teams or anything like that. And then in college, this is kind of a side story, but I didn't know anything about the world, really. And I certainly didn't know anything about people or sexual orientation. Though I feel like in one hand I've been held back a little bit as a first-generation student, and maybe as a gay student, but both and in other areas of my identity have come together to actually help me do better at what I do in my professional and personal life today. I feel like I can be a very strong advocate for sexual orientation and people struggling with sexual orientation, and for students and those in higher education today. I think that in some ways that those levels of my identity can be strengths today. You know, that's always been a source of frustration for me. Then and still today, I'm very much estranged from them. When we're together, we get along, but we don't talk about things that I think other siblings do. They don't ask me about what I do. They don't ask me about why it is that I travel around the world for my job and personal leisure as well. We don't talk about things like that. We talk almost about the then and the now as it is in that very moment of the encounter. And because of that, it was sort of, I have become much more comfortable with that, but never at ease. Earlier on when I was studying and when I would come home for the weekend, should I have ever been able to come home for the weekend, it did not happen very often, and I would need to study, they never really could relate to that. And at some point they were angry at me, thought I was putting on airs, or I was conceited, or I was a know-it-all. And maybe today they probably feel that way still today, but I hope not. But anyhow, it was really hard, and it remains hard, in a sense that I don't fully connect with them and vice versa. Now that said, as they've grown older, I think that they're very proud of me, and they say that. They may not quite understand it, but they know that somehow or another, and the phrases that I often hear are, he got out, he's made something of his life. I'm not sure that they know what it is I've made, but at least they know something's happening. And I'm very grateful for that awareness, at least. Definitely, today in my role here at the University of Kentucky, I oversee education abroad for the university. The University of Kentucky is eagerly moving ahead in working hard to ensure that students are graduating with meaningful international educational knowledge and skills and so forth. And one way to do that is to pursue academic study abroad. And that's what I'm trying to do here at the University of Kentucky, and I might say with considerable success. We are growing as an institution with sending students abroad. What shaped me and motivates me today is, well, are my international experiences. I didn't have those experiences as a student, but later in life, I have since been able to live for, I think, 12 years in Japan. I've lived in Africa, I've lived in Australia, I've lived in Europe. I've traveled extensively and studied international education mobility at length. And for sure, now when I look at students, there's no such thing as a domestic job. There's no such thing as how do I say, we're living in a globally interconnected world. First generation students, I understand, because they're first generation, going to college is a major leap. It certainly was for me. But if we really want to break that cycle to ensure that we have advancement in social stratification and so forth, these students, especially these students, if they study abroad or have some sort of meaningful experience abroad, can help set them apart when they're applying for jobs when they graduate or apply to graduate school or whatever their steps might be next. First generation students have to do that. And I'm not sure that that is the current worldview of first generation students. Yes, it's wonderful to come to college and to get a college or university degree, but now it's a different world than when I was a student. Students are going to have to work very hard to set themselves apart. And I hope that many students here at University of Kentucky will hear me when I say, first generation students, I want you to study abroad too. And we're working out various programs, various scholarships, various levels of support and engagement to make sure that especially first generation students will study abroad. And that guides my thinking from my experience and my professional training to how I work here with the University of Kentucky students. That University of Kentucky recognizes their first generation population, and there are a number of opportunities that are specifically targeted for first generation students. For example, in my office, we have 2 scholarships that prioritize first generation students to study abroad. I think most first generation students would never seek that out. I wouldn't have. First generation students should ask. In fact, I think maybe I would have kept it a secret, and maybe in my life I have kept it a secret in some ways that I'm first generation. But in another way to look at that is, well, isn't that wonderful? That in spite of the odds, I was able to go on and complete my education, and it's something maybe I should be proud of. And maybe if I were back as a student, if I were a first generation student today at University of Kentucky, I might say, do you have any specific opportunities for first generation students? Ask about that, because I think there are opportunities here that maybe will go unchecked if you don't ask.